She walked into the grand ballroom wearing a plain faded dress, no designer label, no glittering jewelry, just quiet confidence in her eyes. Whispers followed her like a shadow. Guests glanced sideways, some snickered behind polished champagne. Flutes. In a room filled with glittering gowns and black tie elegance, she stood out, but not in the way they expected. The security guard hesitated at first, then politely asked her to leave. "This is a private event," he said, clearly embarrassed but firm. Others nodded in silent agreement. To them, she didn't belong. She didn't look like someone who would have a reason to be there. But just as she turned to leave, her calm voice stopped everyone. "Actually," she said, reaching into her small purse, "I'm not just a guest tonight. I'm the new owner of this charity." The room froze, eyes widened, mouths dropped open. That one sentence changed everything. Moments ago, she was invisible. Now she had every soul in the room hanging on her next word. What no one knew was the journey that led her here, the struggles, the quiet sacrifices, the years of hard work that no one applauded. She didn't come to make a scene. She came to make a difference. But life has a way of making the simplest people deliver the boldest messages in the most unexpected places. So how did a woman who was almost thrown out end up owning the very organization that tried to shut her out? And what happened after the truth came out? That night would go down in the charity's history, but not for the reasons anyone expected. Stay with me, because what happened next will not only surprise you, it might just change the way you see people forever. Her name was Lila Martin. Most people in that room had never heard of her. She didn't move in their circles, didn't appear in society columns, and didn't have a last name that came with influence. She wasn't part of the elite donor lists, and she certainly wasn't someone anyone expected to see at the biggest charity gala of the year. But what none of them knew was that Lila had been quietly supporting the cause for years, just not with grand checks or photo ops. She had worked behind the scenes, volunteering in the shelters, helping families, and doing the hard, often thankless tasks that others wouldn't touch. The charity, known for its high-profile events and celebrity supporters, had recently faced serious financial trouble. Donations had dropped, staff had been laid off, and rumors of corruption had begun to surface. What looked glamorous on the outside was starting to crumble from within. That's when Lila stepped in. Quietly, carefully, and completely under the radar. She had built a small but successful business over the years. Nothing flashy. Just steady, honest work. And when she saw the charity struggling, she didn't just write a check. She made an offer to buy it out and clean it up. But she didn't want recognition. She didn't want the spotlight. She wanted change. Real change. That night, she hadn't planned on revealing anything. She'd come just to observe, to see how the organization she now owned was being represented. But when they tried to remove her, when they looked at her like she didn't matter, that changed everything. And now, with all eyes on her and whispers rising like smoke across the ballroom, people were starting to ask, who is this woman? Why is she here? And what does she plan to do with the charity now that it's hers? They were about to find out. But not yet. Lila stood silently for a moment, letting the weight of her words settle in the air. A few guests laughed nervously, thinking it was some kind of joke. But the event coordinator, Danielle Hartman, a well-known face in high society, circles, didn't laugh. She stepped forward, her expression tight, her tone professional but edged with disbelief. "You're saying you bought the foundation?" she asked, loud enough for others to hear. Lila nodded once, calm and clear. 2 weeks ago, the board finalized everything. Danielle froze. She had spent years building her status through this charity, using it as a stepping stone to gain connections, endorsements, and even her current job. And now, this woman, this stranger, had taken control of it all? It didn't make sense. But deep down, she knew Lila wasn't lying. She'd heard whispers in recent board meetings about a private investor, someone anonymous, someone who cared more about the mission than the media. She just never imagined it would be her. Meanwhile, across the room, a man in a sharp suit slipped out quietly. His name was Greg Salter, the charity's former CFO. He'd overseen years of financial reports, expense accounts, and gala budgets. And he had reason to worry. If Lila truly had taken over, the books might not stay buried much longer. He sent a quick text to a contact at a local accounting firm, hoping to cover whatever loose ends might still be floating around. Back inside, the whispers turned into quiet conversations. Some guests were curious. Others were uneasy. A few already started aligning themselves, trying to figure out if Lila's rise meant opportunity or danger. And Lila? She scanned the room slowly. She knew the faces. Not all of them, but enough. She had done her homework. The gala was no longer just a celebration. It was a battlefield in disguise. And she had just declared war. The music kept playing, soft and elegant, but no one was really listening anymore. All eyes kept drifting back to Lila, who now stood near the edge of the ballroom, quiet but steady. Danielle had stepped aside to make a few calls, her smile forced as she whispered urgently into her phone. Across the room, board members started to gather in clusters, their polite laughter fading as the realization sank in. This wasn't just an awkward misunderstanding. This was real. The charity they used to control now belonged to someone they hadn't even bothered to notice. Lila could feel the energy shifting. She wasn't welcome here, not yet. She didn't need to be told. She saw it in their eyes. The silent judgment, the shallow smiles, the quiet scramble to understand what her presence meant. And while most were just confused, a few looked nervous. She could tell who they were. People who had treated the charity like a personal brand instead of a cause. People who had cut corners, pocketed favors, or inflated expenses to look good on paper. The gala had always been the perfect cover. Polished. Speeches, pretty photos, generous-sounding promises. But that mask was starting to crack. In a small side hallway, Greg was making his second call of the night, his voice low, tense. "She can't see those records," he said. "You told me they were cleared." On the other end, someone responded, too faint to hear. Greg rubbed, his forehead, his breath shallow. He hadn't expected this. None of them had. Back on the floor, Lila finally walked toward the main stage. She hadn't planned to speak, but plans were changing. Her heels echoed as she climbed the steps. Microphone, waiting, spotlight catching the simple lines of her dress. The room turned, slowly, nervously, some curious, some scared. And then, with one deep breath, she looked out and said, "There's something I need to say." The microphone picked up the hush in the room. Every breath held, every glass paused, midair. Lila stood still, not for dramatic effect, but because she knew the weight of her next words. "For years, this charity has been praised for its public image," she began, her voice calm but firm. But the truth behind that image hasn't always matched the reality. A ripple moved through the crowd. Greg, standing near the exit, now clenched his jaw. Danielle froze near a corner table, her phone still in hand but forgotten. Lila continued, "In the last 6 months, I've had independent auditors review the organization's books. What we found was disturbing. Money meant for shelters, for food programs, for mental health services, redirected, misused, hidden." Gasps filled the room. This wasn't just awkward anymore. It was dangerous. Reputations were now on the line. But then came the twist no one saw coming. "I wasn't the only one who tried to help," Lila said. She paused, scanning the room, eyes locking with someone near the back. There was a whistleblower, someone from inside, someone who came forward when no one else would. A woman in a black dress lowered her eyes. It was Mia, a former program manager quietly let go a month ago with no explanation. People barely noticed her until now. Lila's voice softened, but her words cut sharp. She was fired for asking too many questions, for refusing to sign off, on a budget that didn't add up. And she isn't the only one. Now the energy in the room shifted entirely. This wasn't just about a mysterious new owner. It was about buried truths, secrets that had names, faces, victims. And Lila? She wasn't just here to expose it. She was here to burn the old structure down, but no one yet knew how far she was willing to go, or who would go down with it. For a moment, the ballroom felt like it stopped breathing. Lila's voice, steady and unwavering, had shattered the illusion that had masked this gala for years. Danielle stepped forward, her smile gone, face pale under the warm lights. "You have no right to accuse anyone," she said, her voice rising just enough to sound defensive. But Lila turned the mic slightly, revealing a small stack of documents. In her hand, "I have bank records, budget drafts, internal memos," Lila said, holding the pages up. "And tonight, I've submitted everything to federal investigators. This isn't just about ethics, it's about fraud, and those responsible will be held accountable." Danielle staggered back a step, her phone buzzing in her hand. Greg, now halfway to the exit, stopped cold as two men in dark suits quietly entered the room. No badges, no drama, just a quiet nod toward Lila that said everything. The walls were closing in. But just as the tension peaked, Lila added something no one expected. "I'm not keeping the charity," she said. "I never planned to. I bought it to clean it out, so that it could be given back to the people it was meant to serve." A wave of confusion swept over the guests. She wasn't staying, after everything, Lila? Looked toward Mia, then back at the crowd. "Mia will take over as director. She's the heart this place needs. And the rest of you, those who used this platform to build your own images, your time is done." The audience buzzed with whispers, some shocked, others applauding softly. And then came the final twist. As Lila stepped off the stage, a woman in a tailored gray suit approached her. "Ms. Martin," she said, "there's another charity in crisis. We've been watching what you've done here. Would you consider doing it again?" Lila didn't answer right away, but the slight smile on her face said more than words ever could. Lila looked around the ballroom one last time before answering the woman's offer. "Maybe," she said gently, "but not for the headlines, only if it's for the right reasons." Then she walked away, quietly, like she'd arrived, leaving behind a room full of people who would never see her the same way again. In the weeks that followed, the charity's old leadership was investigated. Danielle resigned before formal. Charges came, while Greg and two others faced financial misconduct allegations. News outlets picked up the story, calling it a silent revolution at the gala. And Lila's name started trending, not because she wanted attention, but because the truth had finally surfaced. Under Mia's leadership, the charity began rebuilding from the ground up. Donations poured in again, not from big-name sponsors looking for PR, but from everyday people who believed in the mission. Programs reopened, shelter beds were filled, and food drives returned to the communities they were meant to serve. Lila never returned to the spotlight. She went back to her simple life, her quiet business, and the same values that brought her to that gala in the first place. She didn't need applause. What she needed was change, and she got it. The gala became more than just a night of luxury. It became a turning point, a reminder that appearances can be deceiving, and that the most powerful person in the room isn't always the one in designer clothes. It's the one willing to do the right thing when no one's watching. So the next time someone looks like they don't belong, remember Lila Martin, the woman they tried to push out, not knowing she already owned the building. Because sometimes The quietest voice carries the most weight. And real power? It doesn't need to announce itself. It simply shows up and does the work.